Language is lather. Language is lather and juice, music and milk. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in. Some of you newly, some regularly, some frequently. I'm glad you're all here for show 152 in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the sea-singing, seaworthy coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. In show 151, we broke bread, tasted into and raised a yeasty toast to bread, to the art and making, enjoying, and sharing of it, crust to crumb, historically, culturally, socially, symbolically, and metaphors from life to literature. This week, choose your words wisely. Reading, listening into the lingua franca of our lives, the ways we live in, with, through words, shape our thoughts, our days, the world around us with them. In wise to willful ways, first words to last, early to evolved, from the written to the spoken to the sung. Words as food, as a bond, as code or creed, as inspiration, as revelation, as love, as healing, and more. So, let's bring our outer and inner senses to the table of words, language, and embodied meaning that I've set for us to feast around. From the following cultural commentary, poetry, and shared inquiry, including a number of poems and poets new to me, and maybe to you also. I have so much good material for us, and we just might run a bit beyond our usual time frame. This show. Let's see how we go. If that's all right with you. Ça va bien? Va bene? Let's start with Francisco Alarcón. Words are birds. Words are birds that arrive with books and spring. They love clouds, the wind, and trees. Some words are messengers that come from far away, from distant lands. For them there are no borders, only stars, moon, and sun. Some words are familiar, like canaries. Others are exotic, like the quetzal bird. Some can stand the cold, others migrate with the sun to the south. Some words die caged. They're difficult to translate. And others build nests, have chicks, warm them, feed them, teach them how to fly, and one day they go away in flocks. The letters on this page are the prints they leave by the sea. Words are birds. Gracias, Francisco Alarcón. That's from his collection, Laughing Tomatoes and Other Spring Poems. Well, we know about four-letter words, do we not? Well, I have the best one for you. Love is a four-letter bird of paradise. Polly Murray, words. We are spendthrifts with words. We squander them, toss them like pennies in the air. Arrogant words, angry words, cruel words, comradely words, shy words tiptoeing from mouth to ear. But the slowly wrought words of love and the thunderous words of heartbreak, those we hoard. Thank you, Polly Murray, from the collection Dark Testament and Other Poems. April is beautiful in every language. As the Catalonians smile wide in abri, the Chichewa glow hello epulo, and the Chinese sigh Siue, while the Maori gladly, wildly chant Paenge Wewe to the pacified clouds and waving green ocean, and the bushmen and wood-bangled women dance with kubvumbi under the flowering stars. I honor April, this April, in all the colors, sounds, and shapes of her natural beauty, and ever-returning, ever-renewing story. April is beautiful in every language. That was a double poem. It was a poem for a soul sister, April Hicks, on one of her birthdays back in 2018, but it also was a poem for spring itself. Still life. December, country winter morning. Dawn light bluely bathing the room. A sweater-draped chair. The feathers of a heron poised under glass by a half-opened window. A man lying lengthwise in a wide-angled bed. Naked under blankets. Warm beneath the chill. Awake, but eyes still closed, listening to a winter rain falling, feeling his breath rising and falling, recalling a voice in a dream, a curious word, spoken by a Native American man, maybe Pauhati. Wondering about this, wondering what the day will bring, what else it may say to him. Still life. From the Huffington Post, the power of spoken words. Words are singularly the most powerful force available to humanity. They have energy and power with the ability to help, to heal, to hinder, to hurt, to harm, to humiliate, and to humble, said Yehuda Berg. Considering the powerful force of the words we utter, we must discipline ourselves to speak in a way that conveys respect, gentleness, and humility. Be kind to all. Speak words that are beacons of inspiration, enthusiasm, and encouragement to all. Kind and sweet words are always music to the ears of listeners. So true. Well, speaking of inspiring words, how much what we say and the words we use can profoundly affect others, can inspire, can inspirit them. Like this anecdote about Rachmaninoff, the great composer from musical history. Rachmaninoff was in the middle of writing his famous Second Piano Concerto, 1901, when his First Symphony received a lukewarm response. He stopped writing music for 3 years, during which he felt as though he was like a man who had suffered a stroke, losing the use of his head and hands. He was able to overcome his nervous breakdown by visiting a psychiatrist who cured him by repeating the following words to him each time they met. You will write your concerto. You will work with great facility. The concerto will be of excellent quality. And so it was. It was rightly famous and still is. If you haven't heard it, have a listen sometime. E.B. White, author back in time, not terribly far, but back, New Yorker days. He was a quintessential champion of brevity, and he felt compelled to play devil's advocate against it for brevity's sake. And he said, writing is not an exercise in excision; it's a journey into sound. How about tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow? One tomorrow would suffice, but it's the other two that have made the thing immortal. Questions. Yes, questions about how you choose and use your words and value them, savor them. Do you use them well? Do you use them consciously, carefully, kindly? And how often do you even think about how you're using them? Because they are, beyond their surface meanings, energy forms. They carry vibrations in themselves, in addition to your own vibration, your own frequency, when they're uttered, spoken, sung, even written, and when they're received, heard, taken in. There's far more going on with them than most people realize. Hence the need to choose and use them wisely, awarely, and with good and clear and best intent. How and where and when have the power of words moved you greatly? Your mind or heart or spirit or your whole being? What were the most significant words ever spoken to you or heard by you, and what happened as a result then or later in your life? What happened? Is your word truly your bond? Or have you ever gone back on it, broken it? And if so, what did you learn? If you did learn. Do you think about all the many forms of language we have? Things that are highly expressive but wordless, like body language, gestures of creatures, of landscapes, of the weather. What languages of these other kinds are you aware of, tuned into, touched by? Do you know what some of your first words were that your parents may have told you about? What about someone you loved, their last words of life on earth? Or maybe words that came to you through them in a dream after they left the earth. It's happened to me. Probably happened to some of you. What words do you absolutely love, relish? Do you find delightful or delicious to hear, to say, to roll around in your mouth, on your tongue, your lips? Think about. And do you prefer to listen? I know you're listening now, so you must prefer listening at least to this program. So do you prefer to listen, look, or read? One of the reasons, if you don't know, I have these broadcasts as audio only is to invite people to lean in without distraction and without added screen time, to ease in and bring their outer and inner ears, their imaginations to the show, to these weekly journeys we make through a given theme, like the old radio days before television. And what I'd also like to ask, I'm curious about, are you using words, and if so, what words to honor or celebrate yourself? In fact, if you could just think of those right now that you might like to ask to honor, celebrate yourself, or your life, or someone else vital in your life. If you could bring them forth right now from your spirit. Well, let's give thanks. We even can and do find the right words to make our way in the world. Yes. I'd like to reprise this poem of David Whyte, so right for our theme and ripe for our times, to counter the many hard and hollow words filling the world, more than I ever remember my entire life. David Whyte, Loaves and Fishes. This is not the age of information. This is not the age of information. Forget the news and the radio and the blurred screen. This is the time of loaves and fishes. People are hungry, and one good word is bread for 1,000. Thank you, David Whyte. From Goop, GOOP.com. The power of negative words. Figure of speech, how the words we choose shape our lives. Words have power. Their meaning crystallizes perceptions that shape our beliefs, drive our behavior, and ultimately create our world. Their power arises from our emotional responses when we read, speak, or hear them. Just say the word fire while barbecuing, or in the workplace, or in a crowded theater, and you'll get 3 completely different but powerful emotional and energetic reactions. Words are extremely powerful tools we can use to uplift our personal energy and improve our lives, though we're not often conscious of the words we speak, read, or expose ourselves to. Yet even the words of others can easily affect our personal vibration. Actually, we were just talking about that. I knew that this would come up again here. Spend a few minutes with a chronic complainer who uses all sorts of negative terms, and you'll feel your personal energy bottom out. Words have great power, so choose them and your friends wisely. I thought this other part of this article was fascinating. Japanese scientist Masaru Emoto. In an experiment, he tested the power of spoken words. He placed 2 cups of cooked white rice in 2 separate mason jars and fixed the lids in place, labeling one, "Thank you," and the other, "You fool." The jars were left in an elementary school classroom, and the students were instructed to speak the words on the labels to the corresponding jars twice a day. After 30 days, the rice in the jar that was constantly insulted had shriveled into a black gelatinous mass. The rice in the jar that was thanked was as white and fluffy as the day it was made. This dramatic example of the power of words is also detailed in Emoto's books. Well, how about that? Maybe no surprise, but dramatic. Tony Hoagland, Special Problems in Vocabulary. There is no single particular noun for the way a friendship, stretched over time, grows thin, then one day snaps with a popping sound. No verb for accidentally breaking a thing while trying to get it open, a marriage, for example. No particular phrase for losing a book in the middle of reading it, and therefore never learning the end. There is no expression, in English at least, for avoiding the sight of your own body in the mirror, for disliking the touch of the afternoon sun, for walking into the flatlands and dust that stretch out before you after your adventures are done. No adjective for gradually speaking less and less, because you have stopped being able to say the one thing that would break your life loose from its grip. Certainly no name that one can imagine for the aspen tree outside the kitchen window, in spade-shaped leaves, spinning on their stems, working themselves into a pale green vegetable blur. No word for waking up one morning and looking around, because the mysterious spirit that drives all things seems to have returned and is on your side again. Beautiful. Thank you, Tony Hoagland, from collection Application for Release from the Dream. I brought her up in other programs. Good poet for me. Words on Words. This is among timelessly stimulating books about language. There's a couple I wanted to mention, and a couple of podcasts and things that you might enjoy if this is of interest. Well, here's one. It's to dip into. It's The Stuff of Thought, Language as a Window into Human Nature, where Harvard's Steven Pinker reverse engineers our relationship with language, exploring what the words we use reveal about the way we think. It's structured into different chapters, each looking at a different tool we use to manage information flow, from naming to swearing and politeness to metaphor and euphemism. From Shakespeare to pop songs, he uses a potent blend of digestible examples and empirical evidence to distill the fundamental fascination of language, what we mean when we say. He also has a fantastic 2007 TED Talk, The Stuff of Thought. You could look that up, I think, on YouTube. Yes, so that was a review from the Marginalian. I'm actually very curious to read that book. There's also a marvelous book. It's called More Than Words. I have it somewhere in my trove of books here. I have to find it again. But I was thinking about that. Illustrated love letters, thank you notes, and travelogues of great artists, from Frida Kahlo to Alexander Calder to Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the author of The Little Prince. And in that book, there's one line I do remember. Letter writing is probably the most beautiful manifestation in human relations. In fact, it is its finest residue. Yeah, I had that written down. WNYC has a podcast called a Radio Lab, and it's called Words. And on that, words matter. They shape how we relate to one another and the world at large. They frame what matters and why. They can break your heart, tickle your mind, and enlighten your soul. They can steer entire ideologies and even spark the extinction of species. So just a note about it. It examines the importance of words by imagining a world without them. So you may want to visit that podcast sometime. Well, how about from yourtango.com, words for emotions you feel but can't explain. So muse a bit on the galaxy of emotions that words can evoke and invoke and convey. This is a much larger list, but I'm just pluck a few out here that I thought were especially luminous. Sonder, S-O-N-D-E-R, a word that describes the realization that each passerby you come across has a life as vivid and complex as your own. That. Vellichor, V-E-L-L-I-C-H-O-R. We've all explored bookstores and been amazed by the smells and nostalgia. Well, Vellichor is the strange wistfulness of stepping foot into a used bookstore, being filled with nostalgia, and letting the scent of old pages trigger that longing. Vellichor. Chrysalism. Some people enjoy the rain while others find comfort in being indoors during a thunderstorm. That's what chrysalism describes, being inside during a storm, listening to rain and feeling a sense of tranquility. Chrysalism. Maybe you're I don't know what that would be called. Chrysalist. A chrysalist, maybe. Altschmerz. A feeling of exhaustion associated with having to deal with the same issues you've always been plagued with. Are you suffering from Altschmerz? I hope not. Oh my goodness. What would we do? Occhiolism. O-C-C-H-I-O-L-I-S-M. When you look at how extensive the universe is, you might be struck with the feeling of it, or quote, the awareness of the smallness of your perspective. Silience is sort of like the feeling of having a hidden talent that isn't quite extraordinary, but can still make you feel good. And Gnossienne, G-N-O-S-S-I-E-N-N-E. No matter how well you think you know your loved ones, when you realize that this person you know has a private or mysterious life that you haven't seen before, this is known as Gnossienne. Derek Walcott, reading Machado. The barren frangipani branches uncurl their sweet thread out of the blue. More echoes than blossoms, they stun the senses like the nocturnal magnolia. White as the pages I read, with the prose printed on the left bank of the page and on the right, the shale-like speckle of stanzas, and the seam like a stream stitching its own language. The Spanish genius bristling like thistles. What provoked this? The pods of a dry season, heat rippling in cadenzas, black ruffles, and the arc of a white throat. These are all echoes, all associations and inferences. The tone of Antonio Machado, even in translation. The verb in the earth, the nouns in the stones, the walls. All inference, all echo, all association. The blue distance of Spain from bougainvillea verandas when white flowers sprout from the branches of a bull's horns. The white frangipani's flowers like the white souls of nuns that move like ponies under pine trees in the autumn mountains. Onions and rope, the silvery bulbs of garlic, the creak of saddles, and fast water quarreling over clear stones. Rooted and stunted as olive trees, these heat-cracked stanzas, all inference, all echoes, associations. Thank you, Derek Walcott. Well, when I consider, as I was doing for our program, the word full, I also ponder the word less, yet still speaking to us when we're really listening. This is the speaking world. The recitations of the ocean's breaking waves. The hymns rising from the green hearts of forests. The narrations of rivers, rhapsodies of valleys, prairies. The whispers passing between clouds and mountain tops. The soliloquies of the deserts, colloquies of blooming gardens. The paeans chorusing through the canopies of rampant jungles. The shared poetries of the moon, stars, and midnight wind. All the sensuously shaped and deeply throated voices of the speaking world that sing through the air, that seek out listening ears. et de limon, what it looks like to us in the words we use. All these great barns out here in the outskirts, black creosote boards knee-deep in the bluegrass. They look so beautifully abandoned, even in use. You say they look like arks after the seas dried up. I say they look like pirate ships, and I think of that walk in the valley where I said, "You don't believe in God?" And I said, "No, I believe in this connection we all have to nature, to each other, to the universe." And she said, "Yeah, God," and how we stood there. Low beasts among the white oaks, Spanish moss and spider webs, obsidian shards stuck in our pockets, woodpecker flurry, and I refused to call it so. So instead we looked up at the unruly sky, its clouds in simple animal shapes we could name, though we knew they were really just clouds, disorderly and marvelous, and ours. Thank you, Ada Limon. There's another book, splendid book, The Lost Words, an illustrated dictionary of poetic spells reclaiming the language of nature, by Robert McFarlane and Jackie Morris. It's just a delightful book, visually as well as in words and naturally. A line from it: "From acorn to wren, a vibrant encyclopedia of enchantments, reweaving our broken web of belonging with the rest of nature." As the bryologist and Native American storyteller Robin Walt Kimmerer observed in her poetic meditation on moss, quote, "Finding the words is another step in learning to see. Losing the words, then, is ceasing to see, a peculiar and pervasive form of blindness that dulls the shimmer of the world, a disability particularly dangerous to the young imagination just learning to apprehend the world through language." Joy Harjo. "This land is a poem of ochre and burnt sand I could never write, unless paper were the sacrament of sky, and ink the broken line of wild horses staggering the horizon several miles away. Even then, does anything written ever matter to the earth, wind, and sky?" Portsmouth, New Hampshire, summer 2017, where I, poet, and a dear friend, painter, had a jaunt. The painter and the poet. They enter and engage the coastal mise-en-scène together, each in their own particular artistic manner. The canvas of the historied houses, the pages of seaported light, the surrounding tides of water and shadow, people and place, that speak to their outer and inner eyes, and the oysters and wines that brine and pearl in their willing mouths, all blending with silent and spoken words of simple, grateful wonder. This painter and this poet. I have a wonderful, wonderful friend, an imagist I've known for over 40 years, Richard Cale, out in Pacific Northwest. And I loved him saying this, among other things, decades ago: "I'm never happier than when I'm traveling, can't speak the language, and don't know what is going on." I'm trying that as an experiment, just for fun, not knowing, feeling it. Are you and your outer and inner ears tuned, dear listeners, to hear joy in the air? Anne Porter, an altogether different language. There was a church in Umbria, little portion, already old 800 years ago. It was abandoned and is in disrepair, but it was called St. Mary of the Angels, for it was known to be the haunt of angels. Often at night, the country people could hear them singing there. What was it like to listen to the angels, to hear those mountain fresh, those simple voices poured out on the bare stones of Little Portion in hymns of joy? No one has told us. Perhaps it needs another language that we have still to learn, an altogether different language. That's an excerpt from Living Things by Anne Porter. Thank you. famous words originated according to the historical Oxford English Dictionary, hunting down 5 centuries of linguistic innovation. I'm just pointing you to this. It's the spring 2012 issue called Means of Communication from Lapham's Quarterly. And it tracks down the first usages of common and beloved words, according to that dictionary, from anarchy, 1539, to fun, 1699, to cookie, 1754, to hipster, 1941, first appearance. So, paging all amateur etymologists and other word story lovers. Galway Canal, blackberry eating. I love to go out in late September among the fat, overripe, icy black blackberries. To eat blackberries for breakfast, the stalks very prickly, a penalty they earn for knowing the black art of blackberry making. And as I stand among them, lifting the stalks to my mouth, the ripest berries fall almost unbidden to my tongue, as words sometimes do. Certain peculiar words like strengths or squinched, many-lettered, one-syllable lumps, which I squeeze, squinch open, and splurge well in the silent, startled, icy, black language of blackberry eating in late September. Love that. Thank you, Galway Canal. From John Gould, wonderful Maine storyteller, now passed on. Colorful book, Maine Lingo, Boiled Owls, Bildads, and Wazats. Back in Philadelphia, somebody has just said, when we were in Maine this summer, we had a guide, and he said, or a lady just back from Squanto's Pemaquid will report, there was this fisherman, and one day, for the most part, the great Maine secret of saying memorable things is exposed in this volume. Mercenary motives are not entirely the cause of this publication. There is a sly feeling that if more people learn to talk like Mainers, the world's conversations will be notably improved. So I have 2 for you, among many, many I could have offered up. Nanny Plum Tea, a home remedy for measles whose efficacy was happily exploded long since. Sheep droppings, nanny plums, steeped in rainwater. If you think this sounds severe, it says try the main remedy for a tapeworm. 1 tablespoon gunpowder dissolved in a cup of hot gin. Oh my goodness. Nanny plum tea. Well, I don't know. I'm not having that anytime soon, I can assure you. But if you're daring, you go ahead. And whimper, pronounced whimpa. From the small crying of babies and puppies, Mainers use the word for protesting, wheedling, and even advanced profanity. A man caught touching up lobster traps will protest vigorously that everything is a mistake and is said to whimpa. An outraged taxpayer will approach the assessors and they will say he came in to whimpa. A gentleman shouting curses across his dooryard at boys stealing apples will be said to whimpa a mite. The uses of whimpa in Maine speech illustrate pleasantly the native ability to downplay for effect. So enjoy John Gould. He's got some other wonderful books that I read and reread. From French word of the day, the French Speedo is back as France strips down for the climate. En tenue d'Adam. Levant Island off the coast of Hyères is one of France's naturist territories. From April to October, locals and tourists roam free of clothing. Find out why the French government is expanding its no-clothes zones across the hexagon and what, if any, effect this will have on Paris. First, today's French phrase, en tenue d'Adam, in one's birthday suit without a stitch on. Okay. Okay, hold on. Hold on to your horses. A little more from yourtango.com. Rare words with beautiful meanings. They had another big list, but I just pulled a few out. Eunoia, beautiful thinking, healthy mind. Philocalist, a lover of beauty, someone who finds beauty in all things. Philocalist. Alliferous, having wings. Beamish, bright, cheerful, and optimistic. Snuggery, a cozy room. Well, I remember one vividly myself from Dickens' wonderful novel Little Dorrit, and it was attached to the debtor's prison that figures large in that story. Thalassophile, lover of the sea. Raconteur, a talented storyteller. Nyctophilia, the love of darkness or the night. this one's tricky to pronounce. Libro cubicularist. Someone who reads in bed before falling asleep. It may be you, maybe one of them. Puissant, powerful, mighty, potent. Cosmogyral, whirling around the universe. Moonbow, a rainbow caused by the reflection and refraction of the light on the moon. Balter, to dance without skill but with great enjoyment. Pogonophile, a person who is fond of beards. Clouder, a cluster of cats. Mizzle, to rain in fine drops. Brobdingnagian, giant. Think Gulliver's Travels. Gloaming, twilight, dusk. After the sun sets, we go roaming in the gloaming. Evanescent, like a bubble, passing out of sight or existence. Moxie, courage, nerve, determination. Buffola, almost sounds like bufala, mozzarella. Buffola, an informal joke that gets a loud or hearty laugh. Cerulean, deep sky blue, favorite color of mine. Eudaimonia, the condition of living well, a Greek word that translates to the condition of good spirits. We should end the broadcast like that. I do say good spirits. And stellify, to turn into a star. Thank you for those words. Tango.com. Well, here's a poem of mine around an interesting French expression, chante-pleur. It's one word. To sing and weep simultaneously, as they say en français, as I experience it, embody it, singing a new song, a chanson of self, of next, while I weep for a deep lost love, grieve for what was most remarkable and possible. Chante-pleur. For Pepe Vives, man of Valencia, Spain, 2019. I bring my praise in words, as some of you know, in the poetry of words for friends near and far. Here's a couple for you, few. And maybe inspiring you to create bouquets of beautiful words for those you hold dear, whether in a poem or some other form. He lives. Vive, vivas, vivat, vivas. A wildly alive man in every language, visage, passage. Pepe rosso, Pepe il cuore, Pepe l'amore, Pepe el padre, Pepe el artista, Pepe en la vida. He lives. For my Croatian soul sister living in Malta, Zdenka Jekezovic, also known as Z, who may be listening right now, actually. Staying up late and listening. In the kingdom of Z, an archipelago of faraway history and mystery set in a deeply blue sapphire sea, where there's a hymn, El Inu Malti, in an ancient sign language, where Phoenicians and Moors, Normans and Sicilians came and went, along with red and white knights, lives a mosaic spirit with a soul of honey and haven, heart song and beauty, who, in the alphabet of all possibility, adds to her sunlit kingdom a strongly defined and crowning character. Sea Language by John L. O'Donnell for his father. I was 7 when you first taught me the language. Halyards, the mast, main sheet, boom. You'd hoist those words above us, proudly, as if you'd made them specially for me. Our house was a ship full of sails and shouts, the rattle of rigging, and you at the helm, a voice that was always there, even after gales and waves had died. I can still hear you inside a harbor bar, ashore somewhere, talking up a storm while I shivered and drank cokes until I almost burst. Now, beer-bellied, I can taste the salt you left and keep a weather eye the way old sailors do. Our lives together have been distances, arguments over routes, directions, which way the wind really blew. The usual son and father stuff. These days I prefer squalls to the silences in the wary talk of sea between us, afraid of when our craft won't be enough. Thank you, John O'Donnell, Sea Language. Let's listen to first words and last of different kinds. Hunting Words with My Father. Preface. By Mukoma wa Nukugi, for his father's 70th. One morning I burst into my father's study and said, when I grow up, I want to hunt. I want to hunt words and giraffes, pictures, buffaloes, and books. And he, holding a pen and a cup of tea, said, little father, to hunt words can be dangerous, but still, it is best to start early. He waved his blue Bic pen in his office, turned into Nyandarua forest. It was morning, the mist rising from the earth like breath as rays from the sun fell hard on the ground like sharp nails. Little father, do you see him? My father asked. No, I said. Look again, the mist is a mirror. Do you see him? And I looked again, and there was a Maasai warrior, tall as the trees, spear in hand. Shadow him, feign his movements. Shadow him until his movements are your movements. Running my feet along the leaves, I walked to where he was, crouched like him, so close to the earth, feet sinking deeper into the earth as if in mud, turning and reading the wind, fading into the mist till I became one with the forest. For half a day we stayed like this, tired and hungry. I was ready for home, but my father said, I did not say this was easy. You cannot hunt words on a full stomach. And just as soon as he spoke, there was a roar, so loud and stomping, so harsh that hot underground streams broke open like a dozen or so water pipes, sending hissing, steaming water high into the air. I turned to run, but the warrior stood his ground. As the roar and thunder came closer, his hair braided and full of red ochre turning into dreadlocks, so long that they seemed like roots running from the earth. When the transfiguration was complete, before me stood a Mau figure, a spear in one hand, homemade gun in the other, eyes so red that through the mist they looked like hot molten cinders. The long dreadlocks, 1,000 thin snakes in the wind, the leaves and grass and thorns, rushing past him. You must help him. Don't just stand there. Help him, my father implored. But just as soon as I had closed my little hands into fists, the lion appeared high up in the air, body stretched the whole length as the Mau fighter pulled the spear like it was a long root from the earth. The lion, midair, tried to stop, recoiled its talons to offer peace, but it was too late, and it let out another roar as its chest crushed into the spear, breastplate giving way until the spear had edged its way to the heart. Dying, then dead, it continued its terrible arc and landed. I waved at the picture, stood still. My father came up to me and asked, why have you stopped the hunt? I said, but we killed it. I have what we came for. I pointed to where the Mau warrior was pulling his spear from the carcass, but my father shook his head and said, you have done well, but look closely. How can you carry all that in a word? How can we carry that home? It is too heavy. I laughed and said, Father, you help me. But he pointed to the ground, to a steady flow of a bright, thin, red river, furiously winding down from the grooves of the spear to the earth. I, too, pointed, unable to speak, the beauty larger than my imagination. I was confused. I had no words. Come, let us go home, little father. When you are of age, you shall find the words, he said. But always be careful. To hunt a word is to hunt a life. Thank you. Mukoma wa Nukugi. Hunting Words with My Father from Logotherapy. I'm going to save this Naomi Shihab Nye poem, but I point you to it at Poetry Foundation, The Words Under the Words. It's a beautiful poem. Poet Gerard Manley Hopkins died of typhoid fever after enduring years of health problems. He also had chronic melancholy and a mental illness that today we would call bipolar disorder. Yet his last words before he died were, I am so happy. I am so happy. I loved my life. From Poetry Unbound, Padraig O'Twama, Irish poet. He was. This was a recent posting of his. He talks about Paul Celan, born in 1920, German-speaking Jewish family in Bukovina, which was then in Romania. And he talks about a speech that he made And in that speech he said, Celan said, only one thing remained reachable, close and secure amid all losses: language. A poem, being an instance of language, hence essentially dialogue, may be a letter in a bottle thrown out to sea with the, surely not always strong, hope that it may somehow wash up somewhere, perhaps on a shoreline of the heart. In this way, too, poems are en route. They are headed toward. Toward what? Toward something open, inhabitable, and approachable. You, perhaps, an approachable reality. David White has these words. What is astonishing about our contemporary world is how few people are present to what is physically occurring around them. One of the many artful disciplines needed at this time is the art of poetry. Good poetry is speech fully in the physical body and fully in the body of the society into which it is spoken. It takes us beyond ourselves and into ourselves at exactly the same time. It's the place where the distance between us and others, between us and the world, comes to be healed and made more beautiful by intimacy. I also wanted to share some of Lawrence Ferlinghetti's very long poem, just some slices of it, but I'm going to pass on that too for now. What is poetry? It's called A Non-Lecture. It's a rough draft of an Ars Poetica delivered on the occasion of his receiving the Frost Medal back in 2003. He was then 84 years old. So we'll come to that another time, if it fits. Yes, there are many pages to that. Could have had a big chunk of the show if we had just focused on that. But I was excited. I thought maybe we could have it in. I wanted to mention that back in 2010, I was part of the Odyssey that was presented by the Readers of Homer at the 92nd Street Y, New York City. I was a reader, among others, in the Kaufman Concert Hall. There were 200 participants of all ages, backgrounds, and nationalities to read different sections of Homer's great poem. And they could read it in English, as I did, or modern Greek, or ancient Greek, or any language that they chose. And while the English translation was projected on a giant screen overhead, there was beautiful Greek music and Greek food for everybody who was there. It was a 24-hour program. You can come in and out of it. And as one live listener wrote afterwards, as the sun was going down, we tasted black bread, honey, olives, strong wine, and grapes, and entered the space. 12 hours with the narrative wealth of the Odyssey, letting it take us into thoughts and stories and relationships of the present, as if it was just written, describing our own lives, our own wars, our own return. Thus the night unfolded, with one segment flowing into the next, from the child's voice into one singing, into another's mother tongue, from the ancient to the contemporary. And El País in Uruguay said in a review, the success of Homeric days in the midst of our troubled city proved that poetry and its values can effectively counteract any negativism that undermines human society. And as today I turn 65, but only chronologically, remember, we have so many other and more meaningful ages at any point, each of us, from our emotional age to our spiritual age, to our mental age, to our sexual age, philosophical age, and more. This is the Ram. This is at my 61st. Actually, I haven't written one for my 65th, but I thought maybe the title would be When the Clock Strikes 65. But this is the Ram, which is, as an Aries man I am. At this calendar age, next turning page, a wiser and more tender with myself age of 61, the Ram that I am is finding his next footing in the world, his golden fleeciness. The cardinal fire that combusted at birth in my Aries breast, in the spring and birdsong of 58, under a stretching sun, gathering stars, and first blossoming trees, is burning in a beautifully fierce way, toward a clear as Pharos beacon of poetic vision. Many songs yet to be heard, songs of love or praise, dreams, desires, are yearning to be sung in this troubadour's telling time. A life by salty waters, sea, light, air, and wave-washed shores, continues calling, and I, a man, gentilhomme, homo sentiens, am alive and well, sound of wind and limb, full of heart and soul, full of wonder, bringing all of this, all of my one wild and precious self to each moment of being, opening bodily and eagerly, and bowing to my totem, blue heronly, into the deeper beauties and mysteries of nature and the great abiding universe of energies and possibilities flowing inside and around me, with and without words, bringing me to an ever more joyful present, an ever more bountiful future. What words will you choose to mark your next birthday, dear listeners? Make them beautiful, make them potent, embody them. All right, well, coming toward our last sharings and musings for this time together, words of encouragement to sing. Apropos of that, begin singing early. Be the first bird at the first light of your day to fill the silence with song, with your song, with the hymn of your heart, the music of your mind, the melody of your body, with a singular song, one that comes from the mouth of your soul, comes early and daily, when you let nature, your nature, have its open, wide way. And Mary Shelley's encouragement to speak up. Mary Shelley, 1797 to 1851, a woman of extraordinary vision, courage, and passion for justice. She explored the actionable might of words and social change and the power of breaking silence in a tiny potent fragment from her enormous novel, L'Odeur. In a sentiment spoken by the story's heroine, which was modeled on herself. She said, "Words have more power than anyone can guess. It is by words that the world's great fight, now in these civilized times, is carried on. I never hesitated to use them when I fought any battle for the miserable and oppressed. People are so afraid to speak, it would seem as if half our fellow creatures were born with deficient organs. Like parrots, they can repeat a lesson, but their voice fails them, when that alone is wanting to make the tyrant quail." Thank you, Emily Dickinson. And Langston Hughes has a poem, I Too, is the title. It perfectly reveals how poetry can be incorporated within protest, within radical change in our society for equality. It's highly emotive. It focuses on ownership, nationality, identity, and hope. Hughes makes incredible use of commas. They command us to pause and really absorb the I. So here it is, I Too. Thinking of our country of America here, but the world too, other countries as well. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen, then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I, too, am America. Thank you, Langston Hughes. The writer Iris Murdoch, there is no doubt which art is the most practically important for our survival and our salvation, and that is literature. Words constitute the ultimate texture and stuff of our moral being, since they are the most refined and delicate and detailed, as well as the most universally used and understood, of the symbolisms whereby we express ourselves into existence. We became spiritual animals when we became verbal animals. The fundamental distinctions can only be made in words. Words are spirit. Let your spirit flow through your body, your throat, your mouth, lips, and words, my friends. Next to last, a moment meditation at the ocean on an early summer beach morning here in Rhode Island, Quannacontag, Weekapaug. A man by the open sea, open sky, with an open heart an open book of life pages, words, yet to be written, yet to be read. Maybe that's your story. Maybe it's all of our stories. Last for now, remember, dear listeners, you're not a talking head. You're a talking heart, a talking soul, a talking body, who speaks with the energies and cosmologies of a whole being, who voices from a solar plexus place, who converses in a language felt more than heard, understood beyond mind, beyond words. Thank you again for leaning in, listening, and feeling in, for drinking in all these streams and blooms of words. Also for sharing these shows with others. Feel free to post this show or the whole playlist to your social media, however you like. It helps bring new enthusiasts, welcome new listeners. I also invite and greatly appreciate your comments, your reflections, and your affirmations of how these broadcasts engage, enliven, and illuminate you. And likewise, your donations, they matter. Is there any theme you'd like me to build a broadcast around? Send me an email, colin@thepoetorialist.com. And what about your experience of this show on choosing your words wisely? I'd love to know. If you're going to contribute, you can use Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or PayPal to the same email, or simply mail a check to me at P.O. Box 1032 Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. Or you can donate through my site, thepoetorialist.com, and the Donate tab. Patrons can, yes, sponsor or host me seasonally as a working poet in residence for an agreed time in an agreed place in the U.S. or elsewhere in the world to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to them. Meanwhile, as always, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the floating poetry playlist. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Till then, dear listeners, choose your words well, wisely, daily. Clear words, kind words, words of delighting, words of appreciating, words of beauty, words of possibility, words of color and flavor, and ones of celebrating being alive and part of a fascinating journey through the world, through the universe we're each and all on, and you are so uniquely and interestingly, sometimes mysteriously on. I'll leave you with the ancient and still, and I'd say greatly relevant Latin phrase, verbum sapienti sat, a word to the wise is sufficient. Goodbye for now, in good spirits.